Jake here for American Muscle, and today I'm taking a look at the Eibach Pro-Kit Performance Lowering Springs for 2016 and newer Camaro SS and ZL1 models. Lowering springs are some of the most popular modifications that enthusiasts make to their cars, and it's really not hard to see why. They're an effective, inexpensive way to upgrade the looks and the driving experience of your car. And this kit from Eibach is a high-quality setup that's going to offer excellent ride quality with good looks and handling that is sure to transform your Camaro. Now, Eibach has long been one of the biggest names in suspension. When you mention lowering springs, invariably somebody's going to say Eibach, and that's with good reason. Their products are high quality, and that's very important given how vital springs are to performance and handling. Now, these springs are going to lower your Camaro about 1.1 inches both front and rear, giving it a nice even stance. Of course, this is also going to do that all-important thing of decreasing the fender gap, giving your Camaro more of an aggressive look than it came with from the factory. But lowering the car will do more than provide just an aesthetic upgrade. Since you're lowering the car itself, you're also going to lower the center of gravity, and that's going to help improve the handling as well, because the weight of the car is going to be lower to the ground. And since these are stiffer than your factory springs, they're going to reduce some of the pitch and roll that you get on the stock setup when accelerating, braking, or cornering. Now, that's not to say that these are going to ruin the ride either. Being the Pro Kit, these are going to maintain a good ride quality as they're less stiff than Eibach's Sportline offerings or some offerings from other manufacturers. Now, part of that is the fact that these are progressive springs. Now, if you're not familiar with the term, it basically means that the springs are engineered with what is effectively two different spring rates. So you can see the difference in how tightly the coils are wound here at the top versus how much wider they are down here. Now, in terms of ride and handling, these are going to have a softer initial spring rate to help absorb bumps and road impact imperfections, but as the suspension loads up in the corner, the spring rates get stiffer, which is going to help reduce body roll. It's going to allow you to have more control over the vehicle. Now, you'd think this would be more of a compromise, but it really works out to be sort of the best of both worlds. So these are an excellent setup for a street-driven car since you're getting that compliant ride quality while still increasing the handling performance. However, if you're going to take your Camaro to a track or turn it into a strip car, it may be worth investigating some other more sporting options that are designed for those types of applications. Now, that's not to say that Eibach skimped on quality here, because that is certainly not the case. In addition to this really cool black powder coat finish, it actually has some metallic flake in it, which you may or may not be able to see on the camera. These springs themselves are made from a high tensile strength steel for durability. Now, one of the questions that we get a lot when it comes to lowering springs has to do with supporting modifications, or the while you're in there sort of stuff. And while yes, it is possible to just put lowering springs on your car and not have it be problematic, but I highly encourage you to take a look at the health of your suspension before you do so, especially with a car that's heavier like the Camaro. If your shocks are older, if you've got some higher mileage on your car, things are getting a bit worn out, there's maybe some slop in the bushings, just throwing a set of lowering springs on can yield a less than stellar result because it's going to put unnecessary wear on already weakened components. Now, that stance might end up perfect just the way you want it, but remember that your stock shocks are designed to work with stock springs, and lowering springs do have a different spring rate, like we were discussing earlier, in addition to being physically shorter. So your shock isn't going to compress and rebound quite the same way it would with the factory springs. Now, Eibach does take that into account, of course, and these are designed to work with your stock shocks, but this is also an excellent time to consider a set of upgraded shock absorbers as well, since they're going to be better matched to handle that change in rate and geometry that lowering springs provide. And we do have some great options for upgraded shocks available on our website too, so be sure to take a look at those. Now, speaking of geometry, it's also worth noting that when you lower a car, you are going to change the geometry of your suspension overall, as far as how everything fits together and how it sits. You should plan on getting your car aligned once you've got this buttoned up, and give it a couple of days for the springs to settle in too. Pricing is going to come in around $375 for the set, which puts them in the middle of the category when it comes to lowering springs. Now, there are some more expensive options, but Eibach's quality and engineering speaks for itself here. And if you're going to lower your car, these are an excellent choice. As far as installation goes, these are going to get a 3 out of 3 on our difficulty meter, and that's primarily because this is an involved job that does require you to use a spring compressor. While this is not the hardest job that you can do on your ride, it is going to take you some time, around 4 hours worth, and also some patience to get it done. Make sure again that you have a good spring compressor on hand and that you're very familiar with how to use it safely. Also, make sure that you get these springs set in their purchase properly. It is a bit of an involved job again, and if you're not confident confident or you don't have access to a spring compressor, professional installation is always an option. Your favorite mechanic or your local shop will be able to tackle this without an issue. And don't forget about that alignment too once you've got this done and given things a few days to settle. And with that, let's head over to the install bay where we'll walk you through the process.
For this install, you will need air and electric impacts, a ratchet, an extension, 15mm swivel socket, 10, 13, 15, 18, 19, and 24mm sockets, 15mm ratchet wrench, 6, 18, and 21mm wrenches, a small flathead, a clip removal tool, a bungee cord, a pry bar, a spring compressor. Also not shown here is a pole jack or a jack and jack stands. What's up guys, today we're going to be doing some suspension on our Camaro, so let's get started. So our first step is going to be to remove our brake line and ABS line from the bracket that is on the strut itself. So we'll go ahead and grab our 10mm socket on our ratchet and run this 10mm bolt off. Go ahead and take that out. Make sure that is separated. Then we can go ahead and screw this right back in so we know where it's at. Then we can go ahead and pop this clip off of here for our ABS line. We'll go ahead and grab our clip removal tool and pop that off. Pop that off. Make sure that's free. Next we can go ahead and remove our sway bar end link from our strut mount, and to do that we'll grab an 18mm socket and extension on our impact. Go ahead and pop this off. Go ahead and pull that back out of the way. And we'll go ahead and put that nut right back on our end link just so we don't lose track of it. Next we can go ahead and remove the nuts from our mounting bolts here from our knuckle to our strut. So to do that we're going to grab our 24mm socket on our impact and a 21mm wrench. Go ahead and run these off. So you may have to switch out to your air-powered impact, which we're doing right now. Go ahead and get these off. So now we've got the vehicle lowered down a bit, and we've got a floor jack underneath our lower control arm here, right on our lower ball joint. That's just going to help support our lower pieces of our suspension once we release this from the strut mount and everything is kind of swinging on its own. So now we'll go ahead and remove the two bolts holding our knuckle and our strut together. We'll kind of release the tension here. Pop these out. And once you have that out, your knuckle should swing free. Now you want to make sure your brake line and your ABS line don't get caught up on anything. And you don't just want to let this fall right out. Go ahead and grab a bungee cord or something like that. So you can hook in through here. And that's just going to prevent everything from swinging too much and putting excess tension on your lower ball joint or your brake line and ABS line. And now our strut is free, so we can go ahead and remove the upper mounting nuts and get this out. So now we can come into our engine bay here to our strut tower and remove the three 13mm bolts holding our factory strut in place. So we'll grab our 13mm socket on our impact and go ahead and loose these up, while at the same time we're going to reach into our wheel well and support our strut so that we can grab it when it comes free. So as you remove your last one, you want to support your strut. And as that one is unbolted, we can now remove our strut from the vehicle. So now to get our strut out, what we're going to do is drop this down enough to get our top hat and top of the strut out of the wheel well. We're going to fish it out this way. Now once you have this out for this side, you can go ahead and repeat the same steps for the other side. So for the rear, we're going to need to remove this lower plastic cover here on our spring bucket / lower control arm in order to access the hardware we need to. So we've got our clip removal tool, and we're going to remove the 4 clips holding this in place first. We can just go ahead and set that aside for now. So now we have a pole jack under our lower control arm. This is going to help support our lower suspension once we remove the components when we need to. So we're going to start with our sway bar end link here. So we're going to remove this bolt using our 15 mil swivel socket and extension on our impact. And it may need to put a little bit of tension on your sway bar in order to get this bolt all the way out. Go ahead and pop that out. So next we're going to go ahead and remove our lower shock mounting bolt. So we'll grab our 18 mil socket on our impact. Go ahead and get that off. We can use our pole jack to kind of relieve the stress on here so we don't mess up our threads on the way out. Go ahead and pop that out. So next we can go ahead and remove the upper mounting bolt for our shock and get that out of the way. So we'll grab our 15 mil ratcheting wrench and go ahead and get that off. Now these fender liners are split from the factory to allow easier access to this. Now if you do find your shock shaft to be spinning, they do make an indent on the top of your shaft, which we'll need to go ahead and use and grab that. So now we've gone ahead and put a 6 millimeter wrench on the top of our shaft here to hold that in place. Go ahead and start loosening this up. Go ahead and remove our mounting nut. Go ahead and drop our shock down. Go ahead and compress it just a little bit. You can easily do this by hand. Go ahead and remove your factory shock. Alrighty guys, now that we have our shock out, it's time to go ahead and get this spring out. So what we're going to do is we have our pole jack underneath our lower control arm here, and we're going to remove this outer mounting bolt to our knuckle. So we'll grab our 15 mil socket and extension on our impact for the front side here. And then we have a 15 millimeter wrench for the nut directly on the back side. We'll go ahead and run this out. Go ahead and pop that bolt out. Then we can go ahead and lower our pole jack here. That's going to give us the clearance to remove our spring. Pull down on this. And we can pop our spring out of its perch here. Go ahead and remove that. We can pop our isolators out as well. Alrighty guys, so now that we have our strut out, we're gonna need to go ahead and do some things to it because we will be swapping this factory spring out for our new setup. So while at most shops you're gonna see a wall-mounted spring compressor that makes it easy for strut work and everything, a lot of you guys at home won't have access to that. So we have a handheld spring compressor here to show you can just as easily do it at home, and these are easily available to get at any local auto parts store for rental or something like that. So first thing we're going to do is go ahead and remove our cover for our mounting nut and our stud here. So we'll grab a little flathead, and we're just going to go ahead and pop this cover off so that we can access our mounting nut and stud there. Now we can go ahead and get our clamshell locked into place. So this has 4 hooks, so we'll go right in the middle part of our spring here. Now this is a pretty tight setup, but we should be able to just relieve enough pressure to take it off of our top hat for our strut here. Okay, now that we have that in place, we'll just go ahead and run this down by hand. Saves time on our impact. Now that we have that set, Gonna go ahead and grab our impact with our 19mm socket on it. Just gonna apply some tension here to compress the spring enough to relieve the tension on our top hat. Now, one thing you want to bear in mind while using the clamshell style is it does have a lot of pinch points, so keep your fingers clear. This back handle here is the best spot to hold on to this. So now that we have that compressed, we may need to compress it more, but we'll see where it sits once we go ahead and start trying to take this off. So now we're going to go ahead and take our 18mm socket on our impact. Go ahead and try to get this 18mm mounting nut off. We're going to apply a little bit more pressure to our spring here. So it feels like it's still got a little bit of tension. So now we'll go ahead and finish running this off. And then go ahead and remove our top hat. Then we're going to loosen up our clamshell here. After we take our retainer off. Go ahead and pop that boot off with it. We'll go ahead and take our strut out. And we can go ahead and loosen up our spring tension here. And we can remove our spring from our compressor. Alrighty guys, now we have our strut disassembled. We're also going to need to remove our factory bump stop here. So we'll just pop that right off. And we'll go ahead and install our new bump stop here. Slide that right on. That's going to go down as far as it can. Then we can go ahead and grab our new spring. Go ahead and install this. We're going to line our bottom coil up with our stop here. Then we can go ahead and reinstall our upper isolator and dust shield. Line that up like so. Then we'll take our top hat, put that back on. Now we won't need the spring compressor because this is obviously a lowered spring, so it's not as tall. Then we're going to stand this up. We'll go ahead and reinstall our 18mm nut there onto our mounting stud. Get that started by hand. You don't want to mess your threads up. Now that we have that started, we're going to go ahead and grab onto the base of our strut and grab our 18mm socket on our impact. Go ahead and tighten this down. Now that that's nice and tight, we can go ahead onto the vehicle with it. And we're also going to reinstall our little cap cover here for our mounting nut, just to protect it from any corrosion. So now we can go ahead and get our strut back in the car. So we'll push our bottom mounting point back through. Get our top hat back lined up with our strut tower. And we'll go ahead and get our top hat lined back up with our locators here. We'll go ahead and get our factory 13mm bolts back into place. We'll get one in first just to start it. We'll get our other two in. Now we'll grab our 13mm socket on our impact and kind of push up on our strut and tighten down our strut bolts. So now we can go ahead and get our knuckle mounted back to our strut. So we'll grab a hold of that. Go ahead and remove our bungee cord here. Set that off to the side. And we can go ahead and line our knuckle back up. Back into place. Then we can go ahead and reinstall our 21mm mounting bolts. Get our top one in. We'll go ahead and get our bottom one in. Now you may have to move this back and forth a little bit to get it to go. Kind of wiggle it a little. Now once we have these both through, we can go ahead and reinstall our 24mm nuts. Now we'll grab our 21mm wrench and our 24mm socket on our impact and tighten these down. We'll get our lower one here. Now we'll go ahead and reattach our sway bar end link to our strut. So we'll get that nut off of there. Go ahead and get that back through the mounting point. Reinstall our nut here. Then we'll grab our 18mm socket on our impact. Go ahead and tighten that back down. Now we can go ahead and reattach our brake line bracket. So we'll grab our 10mm mounting bolt here. Get that started back in on our brake line. Tighten that down with our 10mm socket on our ratchet. And go ahead and put our clip back in for our ABS line. Now once you have this done for this side, you can go ahead and repeat the same process for the other side. Alrighty guys, now that we're ready to go ahead and install our new spring. Now remember, we still have the factory isolator in our bucket here on our lower control arm. So we're gonna line the end of our bottom coil up with that. And we're gonna go ahead and place our factory upper isolator on our new spring and do the same with that. Line that end of that coil up and pop that right into place. And we can go over to the car. Double check where our end of our isolator is for our coil. Lock that in. Then we're going to go ahead and pull down on our lower control arm. Give us enough clearance to slide our upper isolator back into position. Pop that into place like so. Now we can go ahead and use our pole jack to push our lower control arm back up to our knuckle. Just make sure that goes right back in to that slot. We've got that pretty close now. Now we can go ahead and get our mounting hole lined up. You may need to go ahead and use a pry bar for this. Go ahead, just kind of massage that over some. Might not go exactly where you want it at first. Okay, go ahead and get that started. Make sure it's lined up on the other side as well. Go ahead and get this bolt through. Now once we have that through, we'll go ahead and reinstall that 18mm nut on the back side of that bolt. Now we'll go ahead and tighten that back down with our 15mm socket on our impact and our 18mm wrench. Now we can go ahead and reinstall our factory shock. So what we'll do, get this into position. We may need to compress our shock a little bit, which is easily doable by hand. Go ahead and line that up. We'll get our top mounting stud in place. Then we can go ahead and install our lower mounting bolt here. We'll go ahead and get this in position, get that started. And we'll go ahead and tighten that back down with our 18mm socket on our impact. Now we can go ahead and reattach our sway bar end link. So we'll reinstall our factory 15mm mounting bolt. We'll get that on and get it lined up here. Then we can go ahead and use our 15mm ratcheting wrench to tighten this back down. Now we can go ahead and reinstall our lower control arm cover. Line that back up, and we'll reinstall our clips. Now we can go ahead and reinstall our top mounting nut for our shock. Get that started. And we'll go ahead and grab our 15mm ratcheting wrench, and if necessary, our 6mm wrench. Go ahead and start tightening this back down. Notice our shaft starting to turn, so now we'll go ahead and implement our 6mm wrench to hold our stud. That to lock on. Cover that up. Now once you have this complete for this side, you can go ahead and repeat these same steps for the other side. Alrighty guys, that about wraps up our review and install of our Eibach Pro-Kit Performance Lowering Springs for your 16 to 22 Camaro SS and ZL1. Thanks for watching, and as always, for everything Camaro, keep it right here at AmericanMuscle.com.